The moment he spoke, the room erupted in laughter. At first, it wasn't openly cruel, more like startled disbelief mixed with amusement, but it spread quickly, bouncing off the marble floors and glass walls of the lobby like an echo. Heads turned, smiles formed. No one expected words like those to come from him. An old black man stood quietly at the front desk of one of the city's most prestigious banks. The kind of bank where power walked in polished shoes and confidence wore tailored suits. His clothes were worn from years of use, but they were clean and carefully arranged, as if he still believed in dignity no matter the circumstance. A faded baseball cap rested low on his gray hair, and a heavy sack hung over his shoulder, the kind that suggested long journeys, restless nights, and a life lived the hard way. His face carried deep lines etched by time and struggle, but his eyes told a different story. They were calm, focused, unshaken, eyes that had seen failure and success, loss and triumph, and survived it all. "I'm here about my bank," he said softly, his voice barely rising above the low hum of conversations and ringing phones. For a brief moment, silence filled the lobby. Then the employees behind the counter exchanged quick glances before laughter broke out again. One woman raised her hand to her mouth, trying and failing to hide her reaction. Another leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a smirk spreading across her face. "Sir, this is a private bank," she said between laughs, her tone dripping with disbelief. Another employee tilted his head, pretending to be helpful. "Are you lost?" he asked. The old man didn't flinch. He didn't react the way they expected. He didn't defend himself or explain. He simply stood there, steady as stone, and repeated himself, slowly, clearly, "I own this bank." That was when the laughter grew louder. Customers waiting in line turned fully toward the scene. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A few people subtly pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages while recording. Someone near the entrance whispered, "This should be good," as if they were about to witness a show. The old man felt every stare, every judgment, every assumption pressing down on him. Still, he remained calm. His hand tightened slightly on the strap of his sack, not in fear, but in patience. He had heard laughter like this before. Laughter rooted in appearance, in ignorance, in underestimation. What no one in that room realized was this. Within the hour, every grin would vanish, every laugh would turn into silence, and every person who mocked him would regret not listening when they had the chance. The bank manager, a sharply dressed man with a perfectly pressed suit and a polished smile, stepped forward from his glass-walled office. His shoes clicked against the marble floor with each step, echoing authority and confidence. He had the posture of someone used to being obeyed, someone who believed he was in control of every situation. He had dealt with angry customers, confused customers, and dishonest customers before. And to him, this old man was nothing more than another inconvenience delaying his busy day. "Sir," he said smoothly, though the patronizing tone beneath his words was impossible to miss. "Ownership claims are serious matters." His eyes flicked briefly to the sack slung over the man's shoulder, then returned to his worn clothes, clearly drawing his own conclusions. "Do you have any identification? Any documentation to support what you're saying?" The old man nodded calmly, as if he had been expecting the question all along. He shifted the weight of the sack and reached inside. Before he could pull anything out, a young employee leaned toward a coworker and whispered, far louder than she intended, "He probably thinks this is a shelter." The words cut through the room. For a brief moment, they hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Then the laughter came again, louder this time, harsher, filled with certainty that they were witnessing something ridiculous. The old man paused. Slowly, deliberately, he withdrew his hand from the sack and rested it flat on the counter. His fingers were rough, scarred by decades of labor, each line telling a story of work and endurance. Yet they did not tremble, not even slightly. He lifted his eyes and met the manager's gaze directly. "May I speak to the board?" he asked quietly. That single sentence pushed the room over the edge. The employees no longer tried to hide their reactions. One shook his head in disbelief. Another laughed openly, arms crossed. A woman behind the counter pointed toward the glass doors, as if the matter was already settled. "Security can escort you out if you're causing trouble," she said dismissively. Still, the old man did not respond the way they expected. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't beg to be taken seriously. Instead, he slowly turned his head, scanning the lobby with a look that felt almost distant, like a man revisiting a place from a past life. His eyes traced the marble floors he once approved, the counters he once funded, the logo proudly displayed on the wall, his vision, his legacy. A faint, almost sorrowful smile crossed his face. "You haven't changed much," he murmured under his breath. The words were heavy with history, but no one heard them, or perhaps no one chose to listen. Finally, the manager let out a long, frustrated sigh, the kind that signaled he believed this conversation had gone on far too long. His shoulders stiffened, and the polite mask he had worn from the beginning slipped away, replaced by irritation and authority. "Sir," he said firmly, his voice now sharp and final, "this is your last chance. Show proof, or you'll have to leave the premises." The lobby grew quiet. The old man nodded once more, just as calm as he had been from the start. There was no anger in his eyes, no sign of embarrassment, no urgency in his movements. Instead, there was certainty. With slow eye, intention, he reached deep into his sack, this time with purpose. He pulled out a thick, worn folder, its edges frayed and softened by time. Then another, and another. Each folder landed gently on the counter, but the weight of them felt enormous. These weren't just papers. They were decades of history, sacrifice, and forgotten truth. He aligned them carefully, as if placing something sacred before them. The laughter that once filled the room faded completely. A few employees leaned forward, curiosity replacing mockery. Smiles vanished. Whispers died mid-sentence. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. "These are original incorporation documents," the old man said, his voice steady and unshaken. "Share certificates, board agreements." The manager's confident expression disappeared instantly. His eyes darted across the page as he picked up the first document. His brow furrowed. Then his eyes widened. He flipped to the next page. Then another, faster now, panic creeping into his movements. An employee stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Her face drained of color as she noticed the official seals, the signatures, the dates. These are real," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room fell into complete silence. The manager's hands began to tremble as he continued turning the pages. The dates at the top were old, older than anyone working there. They traced back to the bank's earliest beginnings. The ink, though faded, was unmistakable, authentic, untouched by time. Then suddenly he stopped. His finger froze at the bottom of the page. There it was, a name, bold, clear, undeniable. A name engraved into the very foundation of the bank. The old man's name. "You see," the man said calmly, meeting the manager's stunned gaze. "I founded this bank with two partners 50 years ago. I left when life took me elsewhere, but I never sold my shares." The manager swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. His voice failed him for a moment. "You own—" He hesitated, then finished in a quiet, shaken voice, controlling interest. No one spoke. A pin could have dropped, and everyone would have heard it. The atmosphere shifted instantly, as if the air itself had changed. The confident energy that once filled the lobby vanished, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The same employees who had laughed moments earlier now stood frozen in place, their faces pale, their eyes wide. No one knew where to look. No one knew what to say. One of the employees slowly reached for a chair and gently pushed it forward, the legs scraping softly against the marble floor. "Please, sir, have a seat," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man looked at the chair for a moment, then calmly shook his head. He remained standing, his posture straight, his presence suddenly commanding without effort. He didn't need a seat. He had waited far too long in life to sit down now. The manager swallowed hard. The authority he once carried had drained from his voice. "We sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding," he said, forcing the words out, though they sounded hollow even to him. The old man slowly turned his gaze across the room. He looked at every face, at the fingers that had pointed, the mouths that had laughed, the eyes that had judged him before he ever spoke. Now that those mocking smiles were gone, replaced by shame and fear. "I didn't come for an apology," he said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, yet it filled the room. "I came to see what my bank had become." The words landed hard. He turned away from the counter and faced the customers who had witnessed everything unfold. Some of them looked down. Others stood frozen, realizing they too had watched in silence. "A bank isn't built on marble and money," he continued. "It's built on respect, on trust, on how you treat people when you think they have nothing." The message sank deep. Behind him, security quietly stepped back, lowering their shoulders, suddenly unsure of their role. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The manager cleared his throat. "What would you like us to do?" he asked, his voice unsteady. The old man paused, allowing the silence to stretch. He didn't rush his answer. He wanted them to feel it, to understand that moments like this weren't just about embarrassment, but about accountability. "Start by remembering this," he said slowly. "Never measure a person's worth by their appearance." Several employees blinked back tears. One woman pressed her lips together, her eyes glassy. Another stared at the floor, replaying her laughter in her mind, wishing she could take it back. They had laughed at a man because he didn't look powerful, because he didn't fit their image of importance. They had laughed at the man who owned the ground beneath their feet. The old man adjusted the strap of his sack on his shoulder, preparing to leave. He had said what needed to be said. He had seen enough. As he walked toward the exit, the lobby remained silent. No one laughed. No one spoke. Heads turned, but not with mockery, with respect. That day, a bank learned a lesson no policy manual could teach, and every person in that room would remember it for the rest of their lives. Before leaving, the old man made one final request. The room, already heavy with silence, seemed to grow even quieter as all eyes turned toward him. The board members, summoned in haste and now standing along the far wall, waited anxiously, unsure of what he would say or demand. Given what he owned, given how he had been treated, no one would have blamed him for anger, for punishment, for consequences. "I want this bank to open an outreach program," he said at last, his voice calm but firm. "Help people who walk in with nothing but hope." The words caught everyone off guard. No demands for firings. No threats. No revenge. Just responsibility. The board members exchanged glances. One of them nodded almost immediately. Another cleared his throat and said, "We approve it." Others followed, quickly and unanimously. There was no debate. They understood that this wasn't a request that could be postponed or softened. It was a correction long overdue. As the decision was finalized, the old man reached for his sack and slung it back over his shoulder. The same sack that had drawn laughter now carried quiet respect. He turned and began walking toward the door, his footsteps slow but steady. No one laughed. No one spoke. They stood in complete silence, watching him pass through the lobby he had once envisioned, now forever changed by his presence. Employees lowered their eyes as he passed, not out of fear, but humility. Customers stepped aside, giving him space, sensing they had just witnessed something rare. At the glass doors, the old man paused. He turned back one last time and looked across the room. His gaze wasn't hard. There was no bitterness in his expression. Instead, a gentle smile crossed his face, not the smile of victory, but of quiet satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing a lesson has been learned without cruelty. Then he stepped outside. Sunlight greeted him as the doors closed behind his back. Inside, the bank remained still. That day, a bank learned a lesson no audit or training session could ever teach. It learned that power doesn't always announce itself, that dignity doesn't wear designer suits, and that respect should never be based on appearances. And so did everyone who watched, because sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who own the whole story.